Thanks for checking out this video. For a full list of materials used in this project, head down to the description below and click on Show More. We're going to start off by making a plain row here of our 3 or 4 millimeter cube beads. These are Miyuki Cubes here. And I'm using the 3 millimeter Miyuki Cubes, but you can really do this with 2s, 3s, or 4s. It'll all turn out the same. You'll just have a larger or smaller section here in the center to build your fringe off of. So to begin the center section here, you're going to want a size 10 or 11 needle. Size 12 is, you can use 12 if you're comfortable with it, but you just don't need anything that small. And then you want a thread like a dragon thread. I'm going to begin by picking up one of my cube beads and just letting this bead fall down to close to the end of my thread. I'm going to have a tail thread here of a few inches. And I'm going to go back through that bead one more time with my thread so that my thread loops around the outside. And that's my stop bead. I'm going to pick up one more of my cube beads. And this is going to be the 2 bead width of the sort of backbone here of my project. So now I'm going to work with a ladder stitch. I'm going to pick up 2 more of my cubes, and I'm going to run up through the 2 previous cubes. And as I pull my thread and I keep that tail thread out of the way, my 2 new cubes that I picked up will be sitting right next to the previous 2. My thread is coming out the top here of my top right cube. So I'm going to go to the top left cube. So I'm going to go down through that top right cube and the cube below it. And I'm going to add on 2 more cubes. So pick up 2 of the cubes, and we're going to go down through the previous 2 cubes. And so now you can see I'm in position here just as I was before, but just sort of the opposite. My thread was coming out the top. Now it's coming out the bottom. I'm going to go to the cube, this 2 cubes at the end, and pass up through those 2 beads. And now I'm at the beginning where I started. 2 cubes, up through the 2 previous cubes, and down through the next 2 cubes, those 2 last cubes in this piece here that's going to become the backbone of my bracelet. So continue adding beads in this manner until you get your backbone, your long piece here, the length that you need it for the bracelet. You're going to make it the length that you need it to reach whatever size, whatever length bracelet you want, minus about 1 inch. That inch will be taken up by the clasp. Once you have the backbone, what I'm calling the backbone here, once you have this, the length that you need for the bracelet, we're going to begin adding the fringe section to either side of our cubes. So I still have some thread attached here, and I'm just going to go ahead and keep using the same thread. I don't need to reattach any thread unless I'm getting really short in my thread and I want to add a new piece on. So it should be coming out of one of the cubes. And all I'm going to do here is pick up 2 or 3 of my seed beads. I'm using my Miyuki 11 seed beads. And then 1 of the accent beads that we want to use. So I've got a mixture here of 4 millimeter faceted rounds in a crystal AB, so they are a little bit difficult to see. And then I have a collection of crystals here. They are bicones, rounds. I think I also have some little rondelles in here, just in a collection that's anything about 4 millimeters and smaller. I found that 4mm is just about as large as you want to go, unless you want to make it a little bit bolder. But 4mm was the highest that I wanted to go. You can do, when you start picking up your seed beads here, you can do about 3 seed beads, and that makes a really nice width for your bracelet here. You can see that's what I have here, 3 seed beads. But if you want it wider, or if you want it narrower on your wrist, then you can increase or decrease the number of seed beads that you pick up before your accent beads. I'm going to start here with one of my accent beads, and then I'm going to pick up one of the Miyuki seed beads. So I've got here my 3 seed beads, an accent bead, and a seed bead. I'm going to skip that seed bead and go through my accent bead and all 3 of my seed beads and through both of my cube beads. So I'm coming out on the other side, opposite of where I just added a little bit of fringe. And I'm just going to repeat this step again. So I'm going to pick up 3 of my seed beads, and I'll pick up an accent bead and then one of my seed beads. And let all that fall down. I'm going to then skip the last seed bead and go through all my beads until I come out on the other side where I first started. So my thread is now coming out through the very first cube where I added my first bit of fringe. I'm going to take my needle and thread and go down through the next set of cube beads, being careful to not let my thread catch on any of the fringe. And I'm going to add another couple pieces of fringe here, and sort of alternating how I add the fringe on. So again, just picking up all those beads, the seed beads, the accent, and one more seed bead, skipping that seed bead, and going back through all the other beads in the fringe. 3 more beads, pick up an accent bead, and I need 1 more seed bead here. My seed bead is simply holding on that accent bead so it doesn't fall off the bottom. And I'm going back through all those beads again. And now up through the next 2 sets, or the next 2 cube beads here to add more fringe. So I'm going to continue to do this the whole length of the bracelet. And then once I get to the very end, if I still have more beads or if I want to add some more beads in, I can then go back through the other direction on the bracelet and fill in, make it fluffier as I go. But I'm going to go through once with just adding 1 little bit of fringe here so that I know what that looks like, to see if I'm happy with it, and so that I don't accidentally use more beads than I can and get halfway through my bracelet and realize that I didn't allow for enough beads towards the end, because sometimes that happens. So I'm going to go through once, and then I'll see how many beads I have left over, if any, and then fill those in as I want to, evenly throughout the rest of the bracelet. I now have my fringe on either side of the backbone of my piece here, and I've gone from one side to the other, filling that fringe onto the ends of every one of my cubes. I can add more fringe to this, and I can just go back and forth through the cubes just as I did before, adding more fringe if you have more beads to add, and you can make this even fluffier. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I have enough seed beads for my cup button. So I'm going to go ahead and do my cup button cover first, and then I will add more fringe if I have enough beads left over. I'm going to start with 5 of my my 11 seed beads. I've only been using 11/0, so I'm using the same seed beads for the fringe here in my project as well as for my cup button cover. I'm going to pick up 5 of those seed beads and let them fall close to the end of my thread here, and then take my needle and thread and go back through those beads once again. And continuing here, I'm going to continue past where past my tail thread and go through another 1 or 2 beads. And then I can pull my tail thread and the thread that I'm still working with here, and then I'll pull that into a nice tight little circle. I'm then going to add 1 of my seed beads in between each bead in my little circle here of 5. Coming out of one of my seed beads, I'm going to pick up 1 seed bead and go through the next. And pick up 1 seed bead and go through the next. So all I'm doing here is adding an additional 5 seed beads between all of the seed beads that were the original 5 that I picked up. These beads that I'm adding will sit between 2 seed beads, but on top of the thread that's running through those first 5 seed beads. So now after I've got all 5 of those beads added, you see I have something that looks a little bit like a star. So at this point, we want to take our thread needle and we want to take our thread needle and go through one of those points of the star. Should be your next bead. And now I'm going to pick up 2 seed beads and add 2 seed beads in between each of the points of my star. So I'm coming out of the 1 point and I'm going to go through the next point. So skipping over the bead in the middle, go through the point, and I've added 2 seed beads. Pick up 2 seed beads, skip over 1 and go through the next point. Two seed beads, skip over 1 and go through the next point. Pick up 2 seed beads, skip over 1 and go through the next point. And one more time here. And now here it looks a little bit different because I'm at the beginning. So I'm going to skip that 1 seed bead, go through the point, and that point is actually going to be sitting sort of under the bead that I had added next to it. So I'm going to go pass up through the first seed bead in that set of 2 that I had added between the points. And now I'm ready to start my next row or my next circle here, but it's kind of like a circular row. I'm now on this row going to pick up 1 seed bead in between every bead. So I'm coming out of my 1 seed bead here. I'm going to pick up 1 and go through the next. Pick up 1 seed bead and go through the next. And you're going to continue this just simply adding 1 seed bead in between every seed bead on the previous row until you get back to the beginning. After adding that 1 seed bead in between every seed bead on the previous row, we're going to step up. So just take your needle and thread and go through that bead sitting directly next to the bead that we were coming out of. And now on this row, the circular row here, I'm going to pick up 2 beads in between every bead that's sticking out and simply just add those 2 beads. So 2 beads and through the next single bead, pick up 2 beads and through the next single bead. We should be going through the beads that we added on the previous row. And if your 2 beads are sitting a little funky, don't worry about it. We're going to fix that on the next row. Picking up 2 beads and then going through the bead that we added on the last row. 2 beads and through that bead that we added on the last row. And we're going to continue that all the way around until we've gone all the way around and back to our starting point. I've now finished adding my pairs of seed beads in that last row. And I'm coming out of one of the beads from the previous row. So I'm going to pass up through that next bead, which is that first bead in the pair of 2 from that last row that I just did. So now what we're going to do here is add 1 bead in between the pairs that I just added. So here I'm coming out of my right bead in the pair. I'm going to pick up 1 seed bead, go down through the left bead in the pair, and then I'm going to go up through the right bead in the next pair. Pick up 1 seed bead and go through the left bead in that pair, go up through the right bead in the next pair, pick up a seed bead and go down through the left bead in that pair, up through the right bead in the next pair, and continue on this way until I get to the beginning again. So I'm adding 1 seed bead between the 2 beads that I added in the previous step, and I'm simply taking my thread directly from one of those pairs to the next as I work myself around my flat little disc. So go ahead and continue here until you get back to the beginning, and then we will continue on to the next step. Now that I've finished adding those points, you can see I've got points. It almost looks like a little snowflake at this point. And I'm coming out of one of my seed beads here that was that pair that I was adding that 1 bead to. I'm going to continue on here and go pretend like I need to add another bead, but I'm just going to move on to the next little section here, the next pair, and follow my thread path. And then I'm going to go through the bead at the point. So I'm going to go through that bead that I just added in the previous row. So in this step here, what we're going to do is pick up 2 seed beads and add 2 seed beads between all of these points that we added in the previous step. So this step is pretty simple, just 2 seed beads connecting the little points that should be pretty obvious and sticking up. And this will help to start to form the side. And so you can see it's going to start curving in on itself. I like to use my thumbnail to help give it that curve and to encourage it to go in the right direction. So if you press down with your thumbnail a little bit inside there, it will give you, it'll just start to train it to go in the right direction and start to pull up on the sides. So one more set of 2 seed beads here for me. And I'm going through that point. And then I'm going to step up by going through the 2 seed beads that were the first 2 when I started this last row. And you can see here now it's starting to form kind of like a little bowl shape. But that is perfect for my button shank. So now here what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect all the pairs that I just added with a single seed bead. So just going through all of these pairs and picking up one seed bead in between each pair. And again, I'm just keeping my thumbnail in there so that as I pull and I go around, I'm keeping that shape that I want. That's going to be perfect for my button shank. And keeping that tail thread out of the way. Okay, looks like I'm back to the beginning here because I have a single bead sticking up. That's how I know I'm at the beginning. So I'm going to go through that one single bead. And now here, I'm going to go ahead and drop that button shank in because I want to make sure that it fits, of course, but I also want to be able to start holding it in there and closing this in around it on the back. So now between each one of those beads that's sticking up from the last row, I'm just going to pick up one bead and travel around here, picking up one bead, going through the one that's sticking up from the last row, and adding one bead. Oops. Go. And that tail thread can get kind of distracting. So you want to make sure that you're kind of holding it out of the way as you work. Sometimes I get a little distracted and I'm not sure which one's my tail and which one I'm actually working with. Okay, almost to the end here. Through that bead and through one more. So now all I'm going to do here is go through all of the beads that I've added in the last row. So you will have some thread exposed. Just going through all these beads. Now you can pick up a 15-0 if you would like and fill in the gap between the beads. Because I'm trying to do this project with only the 11-0s, I'm not going to use a 15-0 because I don't want to have to introduce another bead. But you can easily add a 15-0 if you'd like to. And that will just help to cover the thread. I'm going to cover this, or I'm going to pull this tight. And if you want to, you can also go through the previous row too, so that you've got your thread pulling and tightening up both of those rows. So you're going through the previous row and the last row. And that just serves to pull it in tighter and keep it nice and tight over your button shank. But I don't mind a little bit of exposed thread on the back. That never bothers me on the back of a button. But like I said, you can add, if you want, some 15-0s. I also like to keep the loop here on the back of your button as unencumbered as possible. I don't like a lot of beads crowding that area because then it's kind of hard to get your needle through or get anything you need. Any way that you want to attach the button, it can be a little annoying to have to access that if you've got a whole bunch of seed beads around it. So for now, what I'm going to do is just meet up my two ends of my thread, tie it off, and then this button shank, or this button cover, will then be ready to add to my bracelet. So now that you have your cup button or your button cover, it kind of does look like a cup button, but it's a beautiful little button shank with a cover on it. And we have our fringe bracelet complete, of course, without the clasp yet. We're going to go ahead and attach the button to our bracelet. So if you are at the same point that I was on the bracelet, you'll have the tail thread, or the thread that you're working with, actually, you'll have that thread still attached and probably coming out of one of your cubes. If you aren't there, you just want to position your thread so that it's coming out of one of the cubes at the very end of your bracelet. I'm going to attach this button in a very simple, easy way. There's tons of different options out there for how to attach a clasp. I'm going to do it in an easy way so that anybody can attach it without learning any additional techniques today. I'm going to start by picking up 5 of my seed beads. And then I'm going to simply take my button through that loop on the back of my button, take my needle through the loop on the back of my button, and then I'm going to pick up 2, oops, not yet. First, I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to pass through 3 of my seed beads, the 3 closest to the button. And as I do that, I can pull the button close. And then I'm going to pick up 2 more seed beads. And I'm going to go through the cubes on the other side. From the other side towards the cube where I first started. So I've made a little loop here around my beads at the end. So you can see I've created sort of a Y attachment here. And I'm going to go through and reinforce this. So up through 2 seed beads. And if you need more than 2, you can add more than 2 if this is not giving you enough space. I'm going to go through the 3 that I shared through that loop on the back of the button and down through the 3 seed beads and through the next 2 seed beads. Through my cubes again from one side to the other. Not letting your fringe get in the way. Oops. Probably have a little knot there. There we go. And pull that tight. And as you pull that tight, you'll see that those 2 seed beads on either side here at the base will start to flatten out, and they should sit kind of close next to the cubes. And you can actually go through those beads by themselves. So go up through the 2 beads. You can add a bead if you'd like to kind of fill in that gap between the 2 sets. Pull that tight. And then again, back through the cubes. So now here you have a very, very simple attachment, very, very simple way to attach your clasp. And when this clasp sits flat, you don't see any of what you have underneath here, any of that attachment. The attachment is the right length, just the perfect length to be covered by that button. So I'm going to just tie this thread off here at the base of the button. And then I'm going to move to the other side of the other end of my bracelet and add a simple little loop to go around the button. So once I have this tied off, I will then just move to the other end and start there. To add the loop to the other end of our clasp, we're going to use a new piece of thread. Unless you do already have one attached, you can of course use that. I'm using my new piece of thread here, and I'm just simply going to use one of my 11/0s in the fringe as my stop bead, just to anchor this thread in place. So just wrap around that 11/0, and I'm going to go through both of my cubes at the end. Pick up 5 of your 11/0 seed beads, and we're going to go back through those cubes at the end. I'm going to go through the 5 seed beads and the cubes one more time, and this will just tighten it up and tighten that thread so that I have a nice firm foundation to build my loop off of. Pass through 3 of the 11/0s. So you'll be coming out of that third and center 11/0. Oops, and make sure you don't get caught on the fringe. Very easy to do. And now I found that 30 seed beads was perfect for going over my button here. So I'm going to pick up 30 beads. You'll have to test this out, of course, if you decide to use a different kind of button clasp or closure. You'll of course need to test out, make sure that your clasp, or make sure that your loop fits over whatever closure you're using, whatever button. Okay, so that should be 30. But before I get excited here and finish this off, what I'm going to do is just take my needle and thread through that base seed bead there where I started stringing, and just hold this tight so my loop doesn't expand. And I can test this just to make sure that this is the size that I want. And it is, so I'm happy with that. We're going to reinforce the loop by simply going through all the beads in the loop again. And this is the most basic sort of loop that you can make for your button. You can add something to the end. You can add a little picot trim, which I like to do. That just gives a little something extra. You can, instead of just using seed beads, you can use crystals in there as well. Just anything that will create a loop to fit over your clasp. And you definitely want to test it out so that you're not making some fancy loop that then does not fit over your clasp. At about the halfway mark here, something I like to do at the end of my clasp is just add a little picot trim, or maybe in this case, I'll add one extra little crystal that I have. So I'll pick up a crystal, a seed bead, and go back down through the crystal and continue going around my loop. So sometimes that just adds a nice little something extra at the end to make your loop a little extra special. So once you're done embellishing and reinforcing your loop, We're going to go back through the beads at the base here next to our cubes, making sure we don't catch any of that fringe. And now we're ready to tie it off. So we can tie this off anywhere we'd like to and burn down our ends. I like to tie my thread around the existing thread that's already going through the piece and keep all those end pieces out of the way there. And hide this tail, hide this thread somewhere in the project before I burn it down. So here, once I've got this burnt down, I'll go around and clean up any other little straggler threads that I have. And then my project is complete. So you can see here, I love the look of this fun little, it looks like it's coated in sugar. And I like the look of this. I like the contrast of this, lots of texture next to the smooth surface here of the cubes. And then of course the fringe. So all in all, I think it's just a really, great bracelet with lots of different textures and shiny and non-shiny. Just a really great piece. Hope you enjoy it. If you enjoyed this video, please comment below and let us know your thoughts. You can also subscribe to our channel to be notified as soon as we have more beading tutorials out that you will enjoy probably just as much as you enjoyed this one.